Our talk this Sunday is a talk around the idea of change. How will we be changed? Will we be changed? This, in the Lenten journey, this week is the week that changed the world. Today is Palm Sunday, and we are on a Lenten journey. We are on one of the probably most unique Lenten journeys that any of us has had in this lifetime. We have been discussing taking life as a spiritual practice, upping our compassion, so really trying to step up our radical compassion in this time, releasing judgment, deepening our connections, and showing up for each other, showing up for relationships in new ways. We've discussed choosing what is choosing us. And this walk of Lent has truly been and is always an experience of living and embodying a new thought. L-E-N-T, live and embody a new thought. That is something that I have taken on. I grew up Catholic, and I always liked, the Lent time and the whole thing of, when you're young, you don't really like the whole thing of picking something not to have. And usually it was chocolate, so that part, was no fun. But I love the unity interpretation of taking something that was physical and making it something in consciousness. So in Unity, we practice this Lent time of, giving up a thought that no longer serves the highest good, not treating it as a diet, but really letting go of something that is not serving. The other part of the practice of Lent, and even traditionally, is to give up something of comfort, to give up something of normality or craving, to remove our attention from something of comfort so that we can experience an expanded attention to the practice and to our source. Isn't that interesting for right now? Because that's really what's going on, not necessarily that we chose it, right? And if you're having a hard time still with choosing what's happening to you, check out last week's talk on choosing what's choosing you, or choosing what's chosen you. But the Lent experience this year has been one that we're all fasting from some of the very same things, right? And certainly in a way that is more palpable than others, this Lent experience, whether someone is of the denomination that they do anything with Lent at all, and in Unity we teach that it's a consciousness of this time, so it's a collective consciousness. It doesn't have to do with a religion, but it's certainly something that has not been optional, right? It's been a Lenten practice that has affected everyone. We have had shifts to our comfort, or shifts to our normal daily life that have created an expansion of attention. So where has that attention gone? Has it gone to the practice? Has it gone to the source? If not, today is about choosing that. Today is about allowing ourselves to step into that Lenten practice so that we're living and embodying a new thought. So how does change happen? How will we be changed? Well, individual change generally happens from experience. Someone has an experience, and that experience changes them. It changes their lives because they've been impacted. That can be in a positive way, or that can be in a negative way. But that is a way that assures change when people have an experience. But how does consciousness change? Consciousness changes when an experience with mindfulness, with reflection happens. So when you have an experience and then you add reflection and mindfulness, often the result is a change in consciousness. That can have to do with having prayer, having a centering practice, having a rebirth. But consciousness changes when we don't just have experiences and let them be what they are, but we add our co-creative practice to it. How does the world change? Really, how does the world change? I think the world changes when individual consciousness and individuals and the collective shift enough that we reach a tipping point, right? We reach a tipping point of awakening in the collective mind, awakening into the same direction, right? So thoughts, there's been enough change in experience and in consciousness, enough awareness, action, that we have action, thoughts, awareness moving in the same direction. And that's how the world changes. So the question today for Palm Sunday is, how will we be changed? How will you be changed? This is the week that changed the world, the week of Jesus's journey to Jerusalem, the week that he rode in on the colt, the donkey, the week that we are invited into this experience of praising and then taking down. Charles Fillmore has a lot to say about this week in Keep a True Lent, in his book, Keep a True Lent. So I'm just going to share a little bit of the unity metaphysics of this story with you. And if you're not familiar at all with metaphysics, metaphysics is taking the, honoring the literary work of Scripture, but taking it into meditation, taking it into interpretation, knowing that these stories are here for our transformation, right? So it's the beyond the physical, beyond what is in the letters. So on Palm Sunday, Charles Fillmore wrote this. He said that Jerusalem, the holy city, symbolizes within us the habitation of peace, the possession of peace, the vision of peace, the abode of prosperity within us. So the master teacher, Jesus, is doing this walk into Jerusalem, this walk into the center of peace, right? He says, in man, in woman, in person, Jerusalem is the abiding consciousness of spiritual peace, which is the result of continuous realizations of spiritual power, tempered with spiritual poise and confidence. So that's what it is in us. He says that Jerusalem symbolizes the great nerve center in the back of the heart. Can you feel that? That when you are out of harmony with peace, you could almost feel it in your heart. If you tuned into your body temple, you could feel that somewhere. Jesus, he says, symbolizes our I am identity. His going up to Jerusalem means taking the last step in unfoldment preparatory to the final step when the personality is entirely crucified and the Christ triumphs. Jesus riding into Jerusalem on the donkey means the fulfillment of the time when the spiritual I am within each one of us, within us, takes control and lifts up the carnal or animal forces to the spirit. And you could also think of that as ego in the language we have today. Lifts up all of these forces. You could even think of it as the mind that just, the wanders, the addiction mind, all of the storytelling mind. Lifts all of that up to the spiritual plane of mastery, purity, and peace. He says, when the I am takes charge of the body, a new order of things is inaugurated. That's Charles Fillmore from Keep a True Lent. So the master teacher impacted the world and changed the world. The reason this is the week that changed the world is not because we have new religions based after the teachings of Jesus, but it's because consciousness changed, right? It's because consciousness changed. So what did Jesus do? Jesus, the master teacher, walked his walk creating or narrowing, let's say, the gap in the idea of separation, narrowing the gap between people and God. So breaking the illusions of separation, teaching that you and God are one. He walked the walk crucifying ideas of inferiority, right? Taking those ideas and letting go of them. He crucified illusions of the requirements and worship, the requirements and rules around so many things, around worship, around women, around needing to have an intermediary, get God ideas for you, around the idea that money was power, that money was real power, around the idea that death is like a final reality. He taught that death was an illusion. He demonstrated that death is an illusion, demonstrated that when you heal the mind, you heal the body. He demonstrated these practices that led people not to a new religion, but to a change in consciousness that shifted their lives, that shifted the culture they were living in, that shifted the paradigm of the times in such a way that enough of them woke up, enough of them got it, that we're still talking about it 2,000 years later, albeit we're talking about, in some ways, I think, some confusion around it or some misinterpretations, because Christianity hasn't always taken the ideas and the experience and the teachings of Jesus and launched them in integrous ways. But the conversation is still happening, right? The demonstration of freedom from that time period was so impactful that we are still talking about it now. People of the time, many were unaware that they were even living under these limitations, that they were living under these conditions. But the master teacher's healing, the master teacher's teachings, words, demonstration, life example, and the experience of the time, right? The whole thing, the crucifixion, all of that freed people's minds from the confines of the time. So how is this relevant to right now? How is this relevant to Lent and Holy Week right now? I don't know that it has ever been more relevant. I don't know that it has ever been more relevant than it is right here in this moment. Now, there is plenty that we could talk about what's going on in the world right now and what went on with Jesus that was really negative, right? That's just heartbreaking, suffering. If you go there on a full-bodied experience, you might not come up, right? You might not come out. In Unity, we don't have a cross up in the church. One of the reasons we don't have a cross up in the church is because we don't study, we don't stick with, we don't tune the fullness of our minds into what crucified Jesus. We tune our minds into what expanded Jesus. So if we have an image of Jesus, it's an image of a meditating Jesus. It's about the teachings of Jesus, not to criticize the cross or anyone that experiences something of comfort from the cross. But our practice in Unity is to focus on the good and focus on co-creating the good. So that doesn't mean rejecting suffering, but that means aligning ourselves with higher vision so that we do not get stuck in the human condition, so that we can actualize, manifest, and demonstrate the pure potential of being that was born within each one of us, that we are here to be demonstrating, right? So if the master teacher walked around and just saw all of these lame, sick, injured people, saw everyone being subject to the rule of the time and the people who were cheating them and holding them down, he would have been depressed and sitting under a tree and doing nothing. Well, I don't know. He probably would have sat under the tree just like Buddha, and then he would have awakened and had some other way of teaching. But for each one of us, if we allow ourselves to get so low that we cannot activate good, activate light, that we're not vessels of this light, right? Then we're not maximizing our potential, our spiritual potential of what we're here to be. There is a strength within each one of us that is so strong, it can overcome all suffering without denying it. It can overcome all limitations. It can overcome all lack. It can overcome all injury. So that's what we're talking about here. So when we think about the walk of Jesus in Lent and Holy Week right now, and we think about the confines that this message, this Christ message, this awakened consciousness message brought to the world and taught the world, what is happening right now that is birthing a new consciousness? What are we being shown? What are you being shown? What is emerging for you at this time? Have you noticed anything? What have you noticed? As far as a way that we may have been living that was unnecessary or that caused undue suffering. One thing is that, we're recognizing that people that are living in crowded conditions and living in poverty, obviously we know it doesn't work. It's never worked. But people have a more tangible, palpable experience right now, why that is not their problem, why that is all of our opportunity to solve, right? It's all of our opportunity to solve, because look at what's happening right now. We are interconnected, and the world is showing us that we are an ecosystem, that we cannot operate as separate sentient beings without knowing that we share the same spiritual nervous system and, even the same air, the same bacterial viral system, whatever it is, fill in the blank for what your awareness is focused on right now. But we're recognizing that some old ways of being are outdated. Some old ways of living, some old systems are outdated. I love this. Reverend Brenda from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Suffering can be a spiritual experience, birthing a new experience by being present to it. Yes, yes. So when we pay attention to that, and even when we wake up to the fact that we've been suffering, one of the conversations just recently was undue suffering. We've been suffering sometimes when we don't need to. We've been creating things, creating our own problems, right? And maybe now there are ways we're waking up to how we can stop doing that. So think about what's been emerging for you. What have you noticed? I've noticed that it's an altar call for the environment. That this experience we've been having lately is an altar call for the environment. Really, that, reading the stories about dolphins back in the canals and about the wildlife. I was just hearing a story in Boulder from one of my minister friends about, mountain lions being on certain streets that I know exactly where they are. And it's very odd that they're comfortable coming back down. A lot of the things that have been going on is like a refreshing of the environment, right? It's being refreshed. People that have lived in cities forever that haven't seen the sun, that don't have clean air, they're now seeing the sunshine. They're now seeing the horizon. I lived in Colorado for the longest time, and when I lived there, it was clean air. Now when I go back, it's a little heavy on my heart that I look out and, there's just kind of a hazy cloud over Denver, like, Los Angeles has. So those have now lifted. Those are conditions that we don't have to live with if we wake up to that, right? So what else has been happening? What else has been going on that we've recognized that there are some resurrections that are going on right now? I have friends that moved to India, and they lived in New Delhi, and they would show me pictures and stuff where everyone had to wear masks all the time when they're outside. And this was before coronavirus, friends. This is a reality of people living in cities with extreme pollution. And one of the friends developed some asthma. I'm knowing that it's gone now, but developed asthma from living there. So do we need to live under these conditions, or can we take a leap? Can we take a leap in time 2,000 years ago to right now and say, how are there, because a lot of the things that the master teacher taught about were practical things. We're like, people are doing it like this, stop doing that. People are treating children like this, treating women like this, treating the impoverished like this, separating. Let's level the playing field. Let's wake up to things that are practical, which unity is positive, practical spirituality, practical things that we can wake up to. So we've got the altar call for the environment. Who is really working hard on not going to the hospital for anything unnecessary right now? Why isn't that a practice we have all of the time, right? Using, positive, healthy eating practices, taking care of our bodies, using natural remedies, using mindfulness and meditation to calm our nervous system, to calm our anxiety, to do these things rather than, hopping into the ER or hopping into the hospital at every second. Not that it's not incredibly helpful when we need it, but that's the key right now, right? We're learning that it's not helpful to do it all the time. It's not helpful to overdo it. Can we do it when we need it? And even transforming systems, like this idea that now we can see a virtual doctor, and you can even get a prescription when you don't show up to someone, or you can do a drive-through, innovating new ideas that were before thought of as like not an option, or it would take too much to transform the system. We have been catapulted into a time of reversal, of shift, of changing the system. This is what happened in the week that changed the world. What else is going on? I think that we've seen the collective benefit that universal health care can offer. If what we're seeing right now is the future, then to me personally, I think that universal health care is an imperative. It's not an option. I don't want my brothers and sisters, one, for their own health and wellness, but also for the collective, right? We don't want anyone sitting at home suffering with something or passing on something because they don't have access to the same sources and resources. The rapid speed of ingenuity, of creativity, of teamwork right now that's happening when needed. It shows us what we can do, what we're capable of when we have prioritized, when we have focused. What about your family life? Or even if you're alone, even if you're solo and single, you have a family life right there at home. How has that changed? I almost went on a fast for the month of March, I told myself I eat out too much and I need to go on a fast from eating out. That needs to be part of my Lent practice. I need to not eat out. But then something happened. I think it was really intuitive. But then something happened, or it's just my personality. And I just started eating out more than ever, like multiple times a day sometimes. And I'm like, what's going on with me? The second I say I'm going to stop doing something, I do more of it. I'm thinking that intuitively it was knowing you're not going to be able to go out to eat for a long time, so go ahead, soak it up, overdo it. But the practice behind it is if we let go of doing something, we get to experience something else. So even though I thought the reason I wanted to let go of that is because I wanted to get in tune with what it feels like to cook dinners at home, to think about what to make for lunch and for breakfast rather than the normal pace of life that's going here and there, or, having a level of stress that then you need a high level of release. Like, I need someone to cook my dinner because I've had so much going on. I just need to relax. So for me, family time has changed. It's like, and for you, family time has changed, right? So we have time to make dinner. Who has time for gardening? Who's been gardening? Give me some thumbs up if you've been gardening. Time for hiking, walking, bird watching, right? Time for communing over commuting to work. Time for flexibility. Who has prioritized things lately in ways that they did not before? Maybe you had some procrastination lists and you just never got to them, but now you made them priorities. Like maybe you got health insurance, maybe you got life insurance, maybe you did some things that you needed to do, maybe you started living like you were dying, not in a bad way, but really going like, hey, maybe I should get my stuff in order, right? Like all of this stuff, I go along acting like I'm not going to need to have it done. Maybe I should start communicating and having critical conversations that, before I just put on the back burner and they didn't get prioritized. Maybe you're getting in tune with your immortality, your gratitudes, right? We're changing. We are demonstrating on a collective level that our lives are interactive, that we are not separate from each other, that we are interconnected. We can no longer linger in the illusion that we're not. The illusion that our lives and our choices and our countries are not interconnected and contagious. That what we do is contagious. That how we live is contagious. So what are we going to pass on? Some of us have been demonstrating dominion over our finances, right? Watching our spending in ways that we haven't watched it before, becoming more conscious, becoming more aware of what we source. Because right now, we're in a place that what we source survives. That's always the truth, but we're not always so conscious of it. So right now we're aware that our favorite restaurant, whether it's Vivalor in Independence, Missouri, or your mom and pop place down the street, we're aware that they're going to need us to support it, whether they need us to buy gift cards or whatever it is, but that we create what we source, our spiritual communities, right? Whatever it is, we are more aware than ever that what we source lives on, what we source survives. So what are we going to source? We're also in this shift with kind of systems and rules, right? All these rules about how things can be done. And the master teacher was one that really took the rules and put them through the roof, right? But right now we're having some of those same rules. Like it used to be, you had to get communion, or you had to go to confession, or you had to, whatever religion was, right? You had to go to temple, or you had to go to synagogue, or you had to go to the church. If you didn't do these things, you were taught that you're not going to be okay, or you're not going to be saved. Or if the priest's hand wasn't on your head, then you're not absolved. Whatever it is, right? These rituals and rules, right? The way they're done. Even those can change, right? Like in an instant, the church is called to come out with new statements about what's important and what's required. All religions have been called to come out with new consciousness around the rigidity that is often, I might say plaguing religions, but surrounding religions and religiosity. So religions as a whole right now are having to take the deep dive into what the true practice is and what's truly important, which means that they're all kind of forced to step into what we know in unity is true, which is that you could worship in a forest, you could worship in your kitchen with bare feet, you could worship in your house with your coffee, you could worship, looking at the birds and having a meditation staring at a bird. That you don't need the outer stuff. Now, the fear is that that stuff is going to die if we don't use it, but you know what? What is needed and what is necessary, what is feeding and what is awakening, enlightening, and nourishing people will live on if we source it and we get in tune with our principles. Richard Rohr, who teaches mindfulness meditation, says, we do not think ourselves into new ways of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. We do not think ourselves into new ways of living. We live ourselves into new ways of thinking. So has your thinking changed? The collective thinking has changed, right? Nancy says, absolutely, her thinking has changed. So who will you be? Who will we be? Will we be changed on an individual level and on a collective level? You know that a tree in the forest, in a year that there were storms or a drought or extreme conditions, it shows it in the rings, right? If you're someone that knows about that, you can cut a tree and you can look at the rings and you can tell things about the conditions of the time and the impact they had. A tree is impacted. We're seeing in some new literature that there have been studies showing that, yes, individuals, people have that same impact. When a pregnant mother is going through a certain time, or a nation is going through something, some sort of weather conditions or something, and children are born into that time, they're seeing changes, they're seeing impact. So what will the impact be? What will the impact be? I want to share with you from one of my favorite books, written by Paul Ferrini, and it's Meditations on the Life of Jesus. And he says this: I have tried to show you a way of cutting yourself loose from parental authority, cultural authority, and religious authority. I have told you that the laws and customs of men and women are limited by the conditions of their experience. They cannot see beyond them. I have asked you to have the courage to stand alone so you can shed the narrow identifications that prevent you from knowing who you are. I have asked you to leave your homes and your work so that you could stand back and look at your life from a distance, seeing the self-limiting, fear-based patterns of relating. I have asked you to stand back so that you would realize that you do not have to sell yourself short. That's from I Am the Door, and if you want the page reference, it's 214 and 215. I have asked you to stand back so that you would realize that you do not have to sell yourself short. That is my prayer for this time. That is my prayer in this week that changes the world, that humanity will awaken to the knowing that we do not sell ourselves short, that we have experienced some things in this time, in this Lenten journey that is collective right now, that have showed us better ways of living, that have showed us what we're worth, that have showed us an elevated way of being on the planet, of being even with each other, of innovating, that have really showed us what we're worth, all of us. And that we all have worth, and that we all have an impact on each other. The master teacher birthed a new consciousness that's different from a new religion. A new consciousness emerged because people were changed, because people took on the Christ, not followed Christ. People took on the Christ, and they became the way. He had the courage and the strength to break from the old and embrace the new. And people that took on the way followed that courage, created it within themselves. New realities, new norms, new customs, new expectations, new practices. The master teacher left the world changed. Why? Certainly not because he had financial power, not because he had governmental authority, not because he had control, and not because he controlled all of the outer circumstances, not because he was given some magic wand to rule people, but because through inspiration, through principle, and through practice, he changed consciousness on individual levels and on a collective level. So let's take time this Holy Week to reflect. Our song for today, which I'm not playing, I'm going to post it on YouTube after this, is John Denver's song, Healing Time. Healing Time. He wrote this song a couple years before he died, and he never officially recorded it. But it's a beautiful song that reminds me of these times. John Fry sent it to me last week. We had both visited the song some time before. And it's amazing how relevant it feels for right now. But in that song, here are some of the lyrics. Suddenly the mystery is clear. That love is only letting go of fear. Love is the answer and love is the way. Love is knowing just what to do and what to say. Love is the reason and love is the why. There's a wisdom here. There's much to learn. He says, let the mountains talk, let the rivers run. There's much to know, much to understand in this healing time all across the land. He says, through these darker days on this narrow line, help me find my way, help me see the signs. I'm not afraid, I'm not alone. You have taught me well, you have brought me home. Let the mountains speak, let the rivers run, as the world awakes to the rising sun. In each brand new day, in our own rebirth, in this healing time on Mother Earth. So this is our healing time, friends. The Holy Week, Palm Sunday through Easter. I want to close with my tattered book, Your Power to Be by Sig Paulson. He says this, for those of you that want reference, it's page 122 and 123. In the whirlwinds of rebellion that are now shaking the entire world of mankind, each one can become a peacemaker, first of all in his own being by exercising the authority of the Word, the light of the world, the divine self that he is. In the authority, the integrity of his own self, in his own way, his own person, guided and energized and encouraged and inspired by the Father of Lights, the creator of all. He can choose the images that free him and his neighbor from bondage. And so we close with this affirmation together. This is an affirmation from Sig Paulson. So if you would like to know this with me, I will say it and we can say it together. I accept myself as a permanent and vital part of the creative universe. I'm giving you enough time so that you can say it with me. I stop trying to obliterate myself, to get myself out of the way, to become impersonal. With a growing sense of authority and conviction, I reject and eject all inferior pictures from my imagination chamber. I believe in the authority that mine is, the authority that is mine. I believe in the authority that is mine as the light of the world. I am willing to exercise this authority. That's your affirmation for today. Thank you, Sig Paulson. Thank you for being here with us. So,